So hello and welcome to another Flower of Light Mystery School podcast, and as usual I'm joined by Charlotte.
Hello.
And Christine.
Hello.
I think they're here anyway.
I think
We're physically here.
Hello, are you there? So today I think I'm just going to talk about so like say for example in ancient Egypt we have all different mythologies which are really very highly advanced information encoded in what we've previously kind of thought of as myth and parable kind of storytelling. But in ancient Egypt, there's all different pantheons of gods, if you want to put it that way, that were, I don't want to say the word worshipped, but that were studied, let's say, or observed in certain areas in Egypt. And one of those pantheon of gods were known as the Ogdoad. And the Ogdoad were the eight. And Thoth, the god in ancient Egypt known as Thoth, was known as the master of the city of eight. Now, in ancient Egypt, the city of eight it's a Greek name, but it was called Hermopolis, which means the city of eight. And apparently that's where the knowledge of Thoth, let's say, for example, would have been studied or observed. But what I think about when I think about the eight, if you like, is the Great Pyramid. Because the Great Pyramid is the only pyramid that's actually got 8 faces and not 4. It's a noctahedron. So, just a bit of background. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, actually, it's proved, if you want to look at it, it's as seen from above. That's the only way you can see the 8 sides at certain times of the year.
Actually, it was taken, the photograph of the Great Pyramid was taken by somebody flying over in a helicopter, not a helicopter, I think a helicopter, but anyway, it was in maybe the 30s or 40s, something like that.
Yeah.
And they flew over on an equinox. So it's only like on, say, for example, an equinox or a solstice, I'm not sure that you would see the actual
8 sides.
8 sides, yeah. The indentation down the middle. But if you get used to looking at it, you'll see it from looking at it. I can see it. I can point out where the line goes down the middle of one of the faces. So anyway, so Thoth was known as the master of the city of eight. And even though I'm aware that in the story that they tell in ancient Egypt, that they, when I say they, I mean the Egyptologists, consider the city of eight to be Hermopolis.
Yes.
Well, I'm saying I don't.
Yeah.
I consider the city of eight to be the Great Pyramid. And that's my what I know about it. And so there was like a kind of like, for example, the Sphinx, there's this thing called the riddle of the Sphinx. And it's a riddle that the person has to solve, that the ancient initiate would have to solve. And that would be just a small part of what they would have to do to gain entrance onto the Giza Plateau and the greatest mystery school of them all, which was on the Giza Plateau. And so the riddle of the Sphinx was a riddle that the person had to solve. I'm not going to go into that now, but anyway, I'm sure you can find it if you want. But the same thing applies to the Ogdoad, and it had a kind of a riddle, if you like, that applied to it. But it's not a riddle, it's just the knowledge of what the Ogdoad is embedded in mythology and parable. And the saying more or less is, I am the one who becomes 2, who becomes 4, who becomes 8, and then I am 1 again. So we're talking about something that's a lot more complicated than what might seem on the face of it at first. So the Ogdoad, the 8 are represented in ancient Egypt as their 4 sets of they're 4 sets of twins, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
Frogs and serpents. They're represented as frogs and serpents.
Cool.
All the frogs represent the male energy, and the serpents represent the female energy.
Uh-huh.
And so the names of the Ogdoad were Amun, and he would have been represented as a frog, and the female aspect of Amun was Antoinette, and she was represented as a serpent. And Nun and Nunette, and again the male was Nun and the female was Nunette, a frog and a serpent. And Kek and Keket, which were again frogs and serpents. Keket was the female. And Het and Heket, which is again frogs and serpents. So when we look at, for example, frogs and serpents, it's always relating to genetics. And where we see the frogs and serpents, in other words, the Ogdoad portrayed on the walls in the tombs and the pyramids, it's in reference to the resurrection of Osiris. So I just wanted to talk about what we spoke about before, and I'm not going to get into it too much, but the Book of Coming Forth by Light. So, as I've mentioned many times before, the whole of Egypt is the Book of Coming Forth by Light in stone, the whole of Egypt. And so the different areas that the mystery school initiate would pass through when they were going from the south of Egypt through the 7 seals of the Nile until they eventually got to the area known as Rostau, which is the Giza Plateau. And that's the mystery school initiate following the 12 steps of the Book of Coming Forth by Light, not 12 processes of the Book of Coming Forth by Light. And in the fifth process was where the heart was weighed. So the heart was weighed against the balance of the feather in the 5th hour. Sometimes it's referred to as an hour, the 5th hour of the Book of Coming Forth by Light. So that's another thing I should maybe say, that the Book of Coming Forth by Light is often referred to as hours.
Okay.
So the 12 hours of the night. I'm saying 12 steps or 12 processes.
Yeah.
But it's also referred to as hours. So 12 hours of the night. Remember I said they reflected the sun going through when the sun set, and they didn't.
Yeah, like a
stages,
cycle.
all of its-
cycle.
yeah, cycle
So an
stages.
unknown place that they didn't know where the sun went. The duat more or less represented that same thing. It represented where do we go after we die.
The unknown.
So the duat was the journey, if you like,
yes.
that the soul takes. So the journey would be almost like the death experience.
Yes.
And you often hear of people having death experiences and they're told it's not your time, you need to come back.
Yeah.
So it's not your time, you need to come back is almost reflecting what would happen in the 5th hour of the Book of Coming Forth by Light in terms of what the ancient Egyptian initiates were doing. And that happened in, as I mentioned, the Giza Plateau was known as Rostau.
Could you spell Rostau?
Or Rostau. And it was known, when I say it was known, I mean in the Book of Coming Forth by Light. Giza was known as Rostau. And in Rostau, what happened in the 5th hour,
Okay.
or in Rostau, if you want to look at it that way, what happened there was the weighing of the heart. So in Rostau, aka Giza, the heart was weighed against the balance of a feather. Now, Thoth is often represented as the heart.
Yes.
I know he's represented as an ibis. He's also represented as a baboon. But he's also represented as the heart.
Yes.
So, and Thoth himself presides over the weighing of the heart. He records the result. So, the newly deceased is led in, and the area in Rostau as well, Rostau, Giza, is where the Hall of Judgment is. So that's where the heart is weighed.
Yeah.
It's weighed in the Hall of Judgment. And that's where the initiate recites what's known as the 42 negative confessions.
Yes.
Yes, 42.
And the 42 negative confessions are: I have not sinned, I have not lied, I have not cheated, I have not coveted my neighbour's goods, I have not killed, I have not, and on and on. And so you can hear by those that's what became
The commandments.
10.
the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, 10.
Yeah, or 12,
there's
or 12,
30 of them.
even 12 commandments if you want.
You know?
But the 10 Commandments, yeah. Better known as 10 Commandments, Charlotte.
Yes.
Charlotte's adding another 2.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay.
That's fine. So, yeah, that's what
There
became...
was 42 in Egypt, so...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that's what became... Well, when you think, actually, that's a good point, because when you think what they turn... A negative confession means that what you're saying is, look, I never did this. I didn't steal from anybody. I didn't murder anybody. I didn't do anything.
Negative stuff.
Whereas that was turned into commandments.
Yeah, like you have...
Thou shalt not do this and thou shalt not do that.
Like you're being told by some other force.
Exactly.
to do.
So
Whereas
even...
weighing of the feather is you're weighing it against your own life that you live, like your own power.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can even see there in that slight thing, the way the negative confessions were turned into an actual commandment.
Construed.
Yeah, like an order, you know.
Yeah.
You will not do this and you will not do that. Whereas...
Like externally from a power without you, whereas really it's inner.
Yeah, well, that's a good point that, you know, Charlotte was making, because in the negative confession, what the person is doing is actually saying, look, I haven't been dishonest.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas the 10 Commandments are, you shalt not do this, you know. So it was the person's own judgment as opposed to somebody else telling you what your mum was saying.
Exactly.
So the idea that when you went in for the weighing of the heart in the 5th hour, which happened at Giza, as I'm saying, the heart is, in the ancient mystery school consciousness, if you like, the heart was considered the seat of consciousness.
Okay.
The seat of
your soul.
You know, I'm sure you've heard of the intelligence of the heart.
Yes.
It's okay. We have the intelligence of the brain,
Yes,
you know, and we have the intelligence of the heart. But the heart was considered, the intelligence of the heart. Let me put it this way: was considered more important, if you want to put it that way, in the ancient mind. And maybe that's not quite the right way to say it, but I'll give you an example. Because when the body was being mummified, they would liquefy the brain and pour it out the nose, but they preserved the heart. So, you know, the heart was. They considered that the seat of consciousness was in the heart.
It's like morality.
The canopic jars were very important.
Yeah. So we as well speak about connecting to the higher self.
Yes.
Through the intelligence of the heart.
Yes.
So you can see that that's what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And so the weighing of the heart was, you know, the whole idea of your heart being as light as a feather.
Yes.
And if you remember before, we spoke about the feather of Mat. Do you remember Mat? Mat is... Mat is spelled M-A-A-T, and Mat is the feminine aspect of Thoth, as we have in the Ogdod here. We have our Amun, Antoinette, so we have the male and the female, the perfect balance. Because Thoth was known as he who balances. Thoth was the one who balanced all things. He was the creator of writing. He set the planets in motion. He set all the ratios from the distances between the planets.
Wow.
He's the root of all measure.
Okay.
Of all measurement system. So you have, for example, Metatron's cube.
Yeah.
Meter.
Yeah.
It's to do with earth measure.
There you go.
And Thoth is Metatron. Thoth is also Metatron. He had many names. Don't forget he's an immortal.
Yeah.
Right.
So he has incarnated throughout time.
In many different ways.
Yeah. So one of his names was Enoch. One of his names was Thoth. He's also known as Hermes.
Yeah.
He's also known as Metatron. Saint Germain.
That's right. Saint Germain as well.
So he has lots of names down through the ages. And more that I haven't mentioned, you know.
Yes.
So in ancient Egypt he was known as Thoth. Also Tahuti.
Oh, Tahuti is how the Egyptians pronounce it.
Tahuti, yeah.
Tahuti.
Yeah.
T-H-U?
No, it's DJ.
Oh, DJ, that's right.
H-E-U-T-I, I think is how it's spelled. So Tahuti, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I got it.
So the weighing of the heart was, as I said, in the 5th hour, happened in Rostau, which was Giza, and in the Great Pyramid. And so the heart was weighed against the balance of the feather. And if the heart was not as light as the feather. Now don't forget, the feather is the feather of Mat. M-A-A-T. And in another podcast we talked about Mat. And Mat represents order, balance, truth, and justice in the cosmos.
Yeah, universal law.
Mat represents balance, order, truth. Her symbol would be the scales, the balanced scales.
Yes.
You know, it's turned into the symbol of justice that we have now. But if you ever notice, they're not balanced, those scales. And the woman is...
And the woman's always blindfolded.
She's blindfolded. They say that they're supposed to be blind to, you know, the right or the left part. I don't know. That's what it means.
Sounds to me
But
like
anyway...
it's some occult symbolism.
Anyway, yeah. So your heart has been weighed against the balance, truth, and order of the universe.
And did you say Thoth? Who was his counterpart?
Mat.
So
Yeah.
so they were like...
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mat, and sometimes Mat, you might say Shesat is Thoth's
It's
female
another name
counterpart.
for her, yeah.
But they do say, because this is very hard on Egyptologists, and the idea that they turned the neater, which is nature, into gods and goddesses, has confused an awful lot of things.
Yeah.
I am not very knowledgeable about Egyptology, and in past podcasts I've probably said things wrong. In fact, now that I mention it, I did say in a podcast when I was talking about Akhenaten that he reigned for 17 years with his father. Now, I made a mistake there. I only realised it when I listened to the podcast back. He didn't reign for 17 years with his father. He reigned for about 2 or 3 years with his father, and the rest of the time it was with Nefertiti.
Right.
Things like that. I mean, I just made that, you know, because
like
I can
information.
often say things like that where I'm making a mistake.
Well, you got a lot of information in your head.
And another thing I realised
Fair
I didn't say, which I should have done, was when I was talking about the morphic fields, I never mentioned that was the work of a man called Rupert Sheldrake.
You did, I think you did.
Did I?
remember you saying that, yeah.
And another thing, I was talking about the Great Pyramid encoding the 2 axes of the Earth. And I want to mention that that's also the work of a guy called Gary Osborne.
Okay.
I didn't mention that before. I just slipped my mind. So just to give those guys credit for that work, which is amazing. So what I'm saying is that because the gods and goddesses are one, if you know what I mean, there's one male energy and there's one female energy.
But when they're combined, it's like...
I'll give you an example, okay? One time it was my birthday, and I was up in my... we were staying at my mother's and all. Anyway, that doesn't matter. I had birthday cards, and they were all sitting on the fireplace in front of me, and one said to my mother, one said to my wife, one said to my daughter, one said to my sister. But they were all talking about the same person. So what I'm trying to say to you is, imagine the one female energy, right? So they'll call the aspect of that female energy, when they're referring to motherhood, they'll call it Isis. When they're referring to, for example, the fiery energy of a woman who's been... Imagine a mother who... Somebody comes along and tries to snatch her child out of a cradle. She'll go crazy. She'll be like a wild animal. And that's what Sekhmet represents. That wild energy that a woman can have, if you know, that fiery female energy.
Yeah, that.
Sekhmet would represent that. Bast would represent the more calm energy of the female and the motherhood, because cats are amazing mothers. Do you see where I'm getting at?
No,
Each feminine that the Egyptologists turned into gods and goddesses, you could be forgiven for thinking that they were talking about entirely different people, but they're not. They're talking about the one female energy.
But the different aspects.
But different aspects.
Yeah,
so you could be talking about the sister aspect of female energy. You could be talking about the mother aspect. The sister aspect, let's say, is Nephthys. She's the sister of Isis.
That's right.
Isis is the mother aspect, because she's the mother of her. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, the immaculate.
So when you say all those different names, and I've often said that Shesat is the female counterpart of Thoth, and that's right, because you will see Shesat as his female counterpart, but you also see Mat. But they're actually all the one energy.
So
if you can just keep in mind that there's a male energy and there's a female energy. So you can be talking about Osiris, Set, Happy, Ra.
That's it.
It's all about that's all about male energy.
Yes, all from one source, but distributed in different ways.
So if you can really simplify it,
right,
express differently.
Really simplify it and say there is only a male energy, a female energy, and a neutral energy.
Right.
Yep.
And they're represented by all the feminine goddesses represent the female energy.
Yeah.
All the male gods represent the male energy, and all the neutral energy is represented by the child.
Yeah.
Like Horus, for example, the child.
Spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. So, so when I say that Mat is the female counterpart of Thoth, it's as true to say as so is Shesat.
Yes.
But in the form of Mat,
that
female aspect of that energy maintains the cosmic order, truth, balance,
justice.
And she's also known as the scribe of the universe. She records what goes into the Akashic records.
Okay.
Now, Akasha is an interesting word when it comes to ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
But I'm not getting into that right now. But anyway.
You'll find out later.
Akasha, I'll give you an example, like the acacia tree and the Akashic records. So I'm not going any further into that. But, I forgot what I was saying there. Somebody remind. Oh yeah, the male.
We were talking about the 5th hour weighing of the heart.
Yeah. So thanks, Christine. Yeah. So so in that aspect, Mat is the female. You know, in that aspect of the weighing of the heart, Mat would be considered in that time the counterpart, female counterpart of Thoth. So she plays the role where the heart is weighed against literally the balance of the universe. And what has been said there is that the person's heart, in other words, your higher self, intelligence, is been weighed. And if your heart is not as light as a feather, in other words, if your heart is not filled with light, then you cannot go on to phase 6 or hour 6.
Yes.
You can't move on from that point, from the Hall of Judgment. Why? Because there's a character called Amit in the Book of Coming Forth by Light, and it's a composite character. In other words, it's made up of different kind of animals. It has the tail of a crocodile, the head of something else. I think it's the head of a crocodile, the tail of a crocodile. It's all made up of different...
He's called the Devourer.
The Devourer, he's called. And if you don't pass the test of the weighing of the heart, it says that in the book, the way it's written in the book of what they call the Book of the Dead, they'll say that Amit devours your soul and you're annihilated forever. Now, that's not really what it means at all, because you can't annihilate energy.
No.
That's right.
The first
You do
law of
transform.
thermodynamics states energy cannot create it or destroy it. It just changes form.
That's it.
You can't annihilate energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not really what it's saying. What it's saying is that the devourer, what he does is, if you can't pass that phase of the weighing of the heart,
Yeah.
and when you do pass, what you do is you carry on into the land of the immortals.
Mm-hmm.
So Netherland, or in ancient Ireland it was known as Tirnanog.
Tyrannino, yes.
Yeah. Never.
So
Neverland.
that's where Neverland came from. It was
Yes,
known
I
as
thought.
Netherland.
Yeah.
Neverland. So if you don't pass that phase, basically it tells you in the Book of the Dead, that, which is really the book coming forth by light, that your heart is devoured and you're annihilated. But what really happens is you're sent back into the reincarnation cycle
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
with no memory. With
So
no
you're
memory
starting
of...
You have to
all
go
over
do it again.
Exactly. You go back into the reincarnation cycle with no memory of your previous life, with no memory of your previous lessons that you've learned or experience or anything like that. So you kind of start out as a clean slate again. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that you're annihilated. It means that Amit devours your memory.
So, like, if we're referring to that, like what we were talking about in the last podcast, right? That would be what Osiris is talking about, right?
Say that again, sorry.
Do you know when we were talking about how he was like the reincarnation cycle?
Yes,
That's
yeah.
what he was trying to teach.
Exactly.
Was that, and then where the heart is being weighed, that's what Akhenaten was talking about. If you can go forward,
Exactly.
percent,
Exactly.
to make those connections.
So if you can consider Osiris' cycle being from hour 1 to hour 5,
yes.
and if you pass hour 5, then you're going into what Akhenaten was doing.
Which is
Yes.
ascension.
Which is
Okay.
ascension.
That's good.
That makes sense?
That makes sense.
It does. That was very clear.
So, hour 5, as I mentioned, was known as Rostau, and it was in at Giza, and that's where the weighing of the heart took place. And it says that Osiris was the judge, the one who presided. He was the one who sat. If you look at any images, for example, of the weighing of the heart in ancient Egypt, you see Osiris sitting at the top of the hall of judgment. And then you have the 42 judges. So there's these 42 figures that sit 21 on either side.
Yeah.
And they sit in, it's called the seated God position. So they sit with their knees up like this
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
on either side. And they are along with Osiris, the judges. Now remember, there's 42 of them. And also you've got to say 42 negative confessions.
Symbology.
And also remember that the numbers in these parables and mythologies, the numbers are always very important, because the numbers in themselves are giving you information
Yes.
about something else. Do you know what I mean?
Geometry.
Yeah, exactly. So it says Osiris is embedded in the tree, for example. And remember, we spoke about that in the podcast. We were talking about Osiris in being embedded in the tree
Yes.
and the tree of life.
When he was.
So
Yes.
one of the things that has been kind of covered up at Giza for a long time is the tomb of Osiris,
Yes.
which is right below the Great Pyramid.
Okay.
So we're kind of giving you the idea of Osiris in the tree, in the tree of life. And now I know the Great Pyramid doesn't look like a tree, but it is the tree of life.
It's a form of a tree.
It is the tree of life.
So the where Osiris's his like tomb, is it underneath the pyramid?
Yeah, it's in the tomb of Osiris. It's called. Yeah, it's under the Giza plateau. Yeah.
Okay. So like deep in the ground, right?
There's
Okay.
Oh yeah. It's down quite deep. Yeah, you have to go down a couple of different shafts. But it's not only Osiris that's found down there. There's I think there's 3 levels
Oh, okay.
to to before you get down to the Osiris tomb.
Okay.
And in the other levels, they have found sarcophagus, big, huge sarcophagus that are like at the Serapeum.
Okay.
The Serapeum
Wait till you see the Serapeum, Charlotte.
These sarcophagus, like you could stand
Oh my God.
70, 80 people in one of
As
them.
large as a big room. Like half the size of someone. Could be someone's box room in Ireland, the same size.
Huge things. They weren't meant for one person. You could stand 100 people, 80 to 100 people.
And they did not.
Could
One
stand
big
inside
person.
one of these.
They weren't like.
There's no way.
Yeah.
I mean, you could bury a town of people in them. You know, they're huge.
Yeah.
So they weren't burial places for one person, like, you know.
Okay.
So there's actually a couple of them found. And you know, the lids were moved off them. Apparently, how the lids were moved, but anyway, they were empty. But the same as in the Serapeum, the lids are moved off the boxes, and you're told that they were found empty. Well, were they really found empty? I don't know.
I'd be skeptical.
You'd wonder.
Open
But anyway,
skeptic.
everything was found empty. The Great Pyramid was found empty. The sarcophagus was found. Everything was found. It's coincidence, isn't it?
It could all be in the underground library at the Vatican as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, there's another
Personally
interesting thing about the Great Pyramid and the entrance that we would all walk in now
Yes.
You know, the entrance that you would go in. Well, that's not the natural entrance.
I was just thinking, it doesn't...
No, that's the entrance that was blown in by Al-Mamun, who when he discovered the pyramid first. But the interesting thing about that is that that tunnel that he blew, and then he eventually dug in and connected with the ascending corridor. Is so precise. That was one of the mysteries about it for a long time. It's so precise. How did they manage to break in from the outside of the pyramid, not knowing where the correct entrance was, and managing to connect up with the ascending corridor? How did they do that? Well, now, there's a very interesting theory put forth by a guy called Ralph Ellis that suggests that they did not dig that tomb from for that channel from the outside in. They dug it from the inside out.
What? How did they get in?
Well.
But what were they doing? They were taking something out of the pyramid.
Whoa. Something really big. They couldn't get out without blowing aside in the hole.
So they were taking something out of the pyramid. So that tunnel wasn't created from the outside in.
Okay.
And they just got lucky and connected with the
to make the
ascending corridor. That's not what happened. Yeah. They were in the pyramid and they dug it from the inside out to take something out of the pyramid.
Wow.
That makes perfect sense.
What could that be?
Who knows?
Ark of Covenant type thing, maybe. Considering that the dimensions given in the Bible for the Ark of the Covenant, if you were to create something of the size, it would fit perfectly inside the sarcophagus in the king's chamber. So that's just an interesting point there. As we mentioned in the 5th hour of the Book of Coming Forth by Light, this weighing of the heart takes place in a place called Rostau. And you're told that in the Book of Coming Forth by Light. And you see it painted on the walls in the tombs as well. Now, I just want to kind of... I'm not sure how many people will be aware of the comparisons that have been made between Thoth and the character that we would consider Jesus Christ. Now, I know I've mentioned Akhenaten. And also the life being stat. But don't forget, Jesus is a composite character of all initiates.
Yes.
It's not, and like Moses as well, for example, I've said Akhenaten was the character known as Moses. But don't forget, it's actually a composite.
Yes.
It's like the writers of the Bible basically took the story of all initiates and made it out that it was one person and gave them a name. Instead of it being like everybody over thousands of years we're doing this. But they just decided to tell the story and give it one person, one name, as if only one person ever did it 2,000 years ago.
They were narrowing and restricting the information so that they got you to think of it in an exact way they wanted you to.
To idolize something.
Idolize rather than
which is in the Bible as naughty.
Don't idolize people.
You're not meant to idolize it. You're meant to idealize.
What they did.
Yes, that's it. Idolize.
Exactly.
Idealize.
That's what the Amun priesthood trick was.
Give us
people.
Real info.
What you're meant to do is idealize. That means as somebody does.
I was trying to think it's idealized, not idolize.
That's what you're meant to do. Idealize, which means that you do what they do.
Right.
But what they see, Tower of Babel changed the language.
Yeah, they just change the language, swap, and
idolize.
More often than not, they flip it backwards.
It's only a small little way. But talking about flipping backwards, actually, that's a good route into what I was just about to say. Rostau is known, as I mentioned, as the place where that initiation would take place, the weighing of the heart. And if we can compare, as I mentioned, the duat is most closely, I can tell you what it compares to, is when somebody has a death experience. And they go through the point where there will come a point, if somebody has come back into their body after they've had a death experience, it will have to have come to a point where they've been told to go back.
Right.
Okay. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here to tell you the story.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you have a death experience, there comes a point in that experience where you know you have to go back.
You need to return,
So it's your choice.
Yeah.
You make the choice. And you choose whether to come back or not. There's no judgment, you know. So if you can consider that's the 5th hour. Now you can imagine somebody having a death experience, right? When they get to the point where they're been told you can't go any further, it's not your time. Imagine that as being the time where the weighing of the heart happens.
Okay.
And so those that go back are in that point, but they don't go. Amit doesn't devour their heart because they go back with memory. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
But what I'm saying is they didn't go all the way.
Right.
They didn't, because they came back into their physical body.
Yeah.
So remember we said that's resurrection. When you come back into the same body is resurrection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reincarnation is when you leave one body and go into another body.
Oh, okay then.
The same consciousness leaves one body and goes into another body. That's reincarnation.
Right.
Oh, right. Okay. So that's when he devours your heart.
Yes.
Yes.
Resurrection is when the consciousness comes back into the same body.
Yeah, exactly.
So that'd be like somebody having a near-death experience and
That is
coming
a
back
very
into
good
the same
point,
body.
It's a very good point because a lot of people don't understand the terminology.
Yeah,
Really.
yeah. So resurrection is when somebody has a death experience, comes back into the same body, and is able to tell people about it. That's resurrection. Reincarnation is when you die and you don't come back into the same body.
Yeah.
But you reincarnate into a different body. It's the same consciousness. Now, if you reincarnate into that different body with no memory of your previous life, then in hour 5 of the Book of Coming Forth by Light, your heart was devoured by the character called Amit.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that you're annihilated. What that means is your memory is annihilated.
Yeah.
So you have no memory of what came before that. So in other words, you're just born into this world again, new baby, and you have to learn it all over again. That's what happens if you don't pass the 5th hour, do you know what I mean? That's called reincarnation. Reincarnation is somebody dying and going into another body.
Yeah, but is it like at some point, if like you do pass the 5th hour, can you still remember what happened?
That's the point, is to remember, yeah.
Remember everything.
So for example, say you do what's called resurrection, which is you die and then come back into the same body. So according to the Mystery School Initiate, when you have done that, you have now mastered death. And death can come to you only at will.
Wow.
So the masters, once achieving that, didn't have to die if they didn't want to.
Wow.
They could reanimate the body they were in.
Yeah.
And keep it young. And keep it healthy.
Yeah.
Wow.
To live in it for as long as they wanted.
Wow.
But they could leave and go whenever they wanted. So in other words, if they wanted to die, they could just go, okay, I'm gone now, bump.
Bye.
There's actually a story of a man called Paramahansa Yogananda. And he's a yogi who wrote a couple of books. And one of his books was, I think it was called Biography of a Yogi. But anyway, he basically was one of those people who was... well, a lot of people would have said he was an ascended master, you know. So he was somebody who came into his body with full knowledge of all his lives before, and therefore had control over death, could leave when he wanted to.
Yes.
So he pretty much proved that because he was, I don't know exactly how old he was, but he was invited to a talk. And anyway, one night he brought self-realization, the self-realization fellowship, in other words, that kind of yoga into America. That's what he was kind of famous for.
Yeah.
Wow.
And anyway, he was at a talk one night and he basically stood up at the talk and said, he gave his talk and stood up at the end of it and said, okay, I'm leaving now. Sat down and he was dead in his chair.
There you go.
So there are people who can, can control death. So I know it is complicated. I know it's kind of complicated with the resurrection and the reincarnation and the ascension. It is kind of complicated.
We can go into, but like for now, just basic understanding and an explanation of terminology.
I just wanted to make a reference because we were talking about the Jed pillars last time.
Oh yes.
And Jedi and Star Wars. But a Star Wars spoiler: if you talk about yoga and yogis who can just choose when they want to leave.
Well, you see,
Yoda did that.
Well, you know what?
They all did. They were all ascended masters.
Well, it's great that you're saying that because I actually don't really... I don't like Star Wars, to be honest with you, so I've never watched it, so I wouldn't know anything about that.
No.
But that's great what you're saying there, yeah.
Yoda was just gone because he was kind of the known person like that yogi.
Paramahansa Yogananda,
yeah, and he just went...
At will.
He was
just dematerialized.
Bye.
You see, all this information is embedded in movies that we get from Hollywood.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Programming.
Yeah, exactly. But it's embedded in such a way that it's always shown as if you can't do this.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't be able to do this, but these kind of characters from outer space can, but you can't. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like the Jesus story.
Yeah.
That's it.
Jesus can ascend, but you can't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're stuck here.
It's the same thing. It's like the Jedi Masters are masters of the Force, which is literally light, the consciousness of the universe.
Force.
And in the movies themselves, the person who was supposed to be the savior became the evil villain, Darth Vader, because he had the highest metachlorians in the universe. Well, metachlorians were because they couldn't say mitochondria.
Yeah.
So it's actually meant to be mitochondria, which is the female DNA that goes through every generation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they are telling you the story, just like you said, but literally it's flipped, so that you are in their paradigm. You're funneling your energy into that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mythology. You're giving you're basically giving your energy away. It's a great energy vampire hoo-ha.
Yeah.
But if you're conscious of it, it can't affect you.
You can be Yoda too, people.
That's it.
Yeah, you can be Yoda.
And especially Baby Yoda.
Baby Yoda.
So yeah, so the place. So in
Unrelated note. Sorry.
No, so in Rostow, as I mentioned, the Dwayne of the Heart happened, but also I'm just trying to show you how this kind of Jesus Christ story
Yes.
came from this ancient information, if you like.
Yeah.
And just kind of along that note, if you look at the word Rostow and you spell it backwards, it spells Stauros. And Stauros is the Greek word for the cross that Jesus was crucified on.
Wow.
Whoa.
So Stauros, Rostow, you know.
Yeah.
So it's embedded in the whole thing that way. And it also tells you that Jesus was was crucified on in a place called Golgotha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Golgotha means the place of the skull.
Ooh.
So one of the things I mentioned, at least I think I mentioned it in one of the podcasts that we had before, was how the Great Pyramid reflects the human brain.
Yeah.
Did I talk about that? I
Yeah,
think I
you
did.
did. Yeah.
Oh, we did, yeah.
And how the King's Chamber is the pineal gland.
Yes.
And the Queen's Chamber is the pituitary gland.
Yeah.
And there's chambers below which represent the thalamus. So the opening of the third eye happens when those three glands work in synchronicity and harmony with each other. That's what's called opening the third eye.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those three glands, yeah, the third eye. Yeah.
Yeah, the pineal, pituitary. And if you look inside your brain, if anybody wants to Google actual images of inside your brain, you'll see that you actually have the eye of Horus. If you cut a cross section of a human brain,
Yeah.
you can see the physical image of the eye of Horus inside your brain.
Yes.
And
then the pineal gland has got the rods and cones like an actual eyeball, and it's looking up.
And it's connected to your optic nerve as well.
Yeah.
So your what's called your third eye is your pineal gland, which is actually, it is an eye. It is actually an eye, yeah. But it's one that we don't use. And it's obviously, we have two eyes. We have two eyes that experience a duality.
That's right. The information coming into
Remember I was
your
talking
eyeball,
about that before?
Right? Yes, the
Light and
dual.
dark, night and day. Yeah. Not light and dark, night and day, this and that. We always see it as we have to make a decision between this and that. Because we live in a duality. But your third eye is there.
The grey.
As the third way.
Yeah.
To take
get
you
out and
out of
get
that
in.
duality when you find the ability to stimulate or activate
The grey way.
your pineal gland.
Love that.
And this is all about the creation of the Philosopher's Stone
Yeah.
in your own body. That's what alchemy is about.
Yeah.
Everything in Egypt is actually representing things in the human body. So if you look at the Yog-Dod, and I mentioned there the thing that they talk about, I am the one who becomes 2, who becomes 4, who becomes 8, and then I am 1 again. That's actually talking about cell mitosis. And it's talking about the process of one cell dividing
Wow.
and becoming another sister
Yeah.
cell, is what it's called, a
Yeah.
sister cell. So it's the 7 steps that a cell takes to from when it starts to divide, so that it equally shares its genetic information. So that when the new cell is created, it will have a fully formed package of that genetic information.
Is that for like creation of life? Like
Cell mitosis, yeah.
yeah, like fertilization of like an egg or
Yeah, it's when cell division starts to take place, yeah, exactly.
okay.
There's different types of cells, and they divide and in different ways and for different purposes. But so cell mitosis is, as you just mentioned, the way the cells would divide there in a newly created ovum as it starts to divide.
That's what I mean.
And so that's what we replicate and draw when we begin to draw our flower of life geometry. It's that dance of life, those 7, 8 steps. And if you think about it, 7, 8 is to do with the octave as well.
Yeah.
So
a new octave
it's a
starts on the
quantum,
eighth
if
note.
you like. Exactly. So the first note of the octave is repeated on a higher scale on the 8th.
Yeah, it's the octave is the
And so if you look at what we just
cycle,
discussed, the cell mitosis, it takes 7 steps for a cell to divide. And on the 8th, you have the new cell. So it's exactly the same as the octave.
That's
Works
fun.
exactly the same way.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. So remember, that's the law of correspondence, as above, so below.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
about
even-
the emerald tablets where all this comes from. Oh, go ahead, Charlotte.
Even that's funny because if you listen to the opening music at the beginning of this podcast, it's like an octave of F. that I
Very good.
composed.
I'm not very musical, Charlotte, so
No,
I wouldn't
yeah,
pick that up.
Charlotte composed
No,
the
I
music.
composed it and
Charlotte is the musician.
it goes from like the low F to the highest.
Does it really?
On my harp, because I play the harp.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Thanks for that, Charlotte.
I
didn't
played
know.
the singing bowl.
That's a tidbit, guys.
That's interesting, isn't it, considering?
And that was unknown information, so it's all coming together.
So you were innately, intuitively in the harmonic.
Guys.
And I'm not
Here
that
we are.
musical to know that that's what it was. So unfortunately, I never. But anyway,
I'm bringing the theory.
exactly. You're bringing in the music. So yeah, you know, and there's other kind of ways that we can see that what we, you know, as I mentioned, the story that became the crucifixion of Jesus.
Yes.
Was told to us in such a way that we were led, you know, through religion, made believe that one person called Jesus came onto the earth and 2,000 years ago or 2020 years ago, and he time began. It's when we started to calculate time from,
Yes.
you know.
Oh yeah, that's it. AD and BC.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's another like kink in the machine. Right?
Yeah.
Like they've distorted
An
all the
nexus point
timelines.
kind of,
we
yeah.
are not allowed to know what time we're in or what. And the Gregorian calendar as well.
So basically, what we've been told is that one person came to earth at a certain time. He was the Son of God, the only Son of God, and he died for our sins.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
And
That's an
ascended to
anathema
heaven.
now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine it? He represents every initiate, which is every human being, because every human being can be an ascended master.
Mm-hmm.
So they're basically telling you, you know...
Well, that's what I'm saying. They took the knowledge
one
of
person.
what every
Take the
human
power.
being was supposed to know and,
Yeah.
and can do,
Yes.
which is exactly what Jesus did.
Yes.
Because they were talking about any initiate. But when they wrote the Bible, of course, they changed that around and just made it that one person did it. So really what it does is it disempowers everybody else.
That's it.
Because, okay, Jesus came to save us, so we're kind of these lost people who don't know how to do this, but
And
this
forgive
guy
us-
did.
But like you were
Yeah.
just saying, and forgive us our sins, whereas we just have the 42 negative confessions with like, you forgive yourself.
Yeah.
It's like putting the guilt on you.
Yes.
And you also judge yourself.
Living,
If you
living in a
think,
state of fear instead
Yes.
of being
If you
love
think-
and light.
So then somebody wants to harvest our fear. That's all I have to say.
well, yeah. But if you
Taking
think,
power.
excuse me, if you think about being in the 5th hour and you're reciting those negative confessions, now also remember, because maybe it might pop into your mind or somebody who's listening that, well, you could always lie. You could
Yeah.
always, when you're saying the negative confessions, you could always say, I never stole, even though you did. Do you know what I mean?
Hey,
Well, you
no.
can't. You can't.
You
Because
kind of.
what we're talking about here is the Akashic Records. Really, this is what I know it's a bit complicated, and I'm talking about the Book of Coming Forth by Light, and I'm calling it the Akashic Records, but it's the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And the Akashic Records is literally your cosmic fingerprint. Everything
Whoa.
you look at and everything you touch, your fingerprint is as unique as you.
That's it.
Yeah.
And everything you touch, you leave your fingerprint all over.
Yeah.
From the time you're born
It's great.
till the time you die.
Wow.
And your footprint as well.
Wow.
But you also leave your energetic print.
Yeah.
So everything you look at, there is nothing in this universe that will create the same signature tune, in other words, the same sound, as the sound that's created when you look at a certain thing. I can look at the same thing,
Yeah, 'cause
but it
no
doesn't
one ever
create the
sees
same sound.
thing.
It's how you perceive it.
It's an actual sound that's created.
Yeah.
Because I know people don't think their thoughts make a sound.
But they do, yes.
But they do.
Yeah.
So when you look at something and you're perceiving that the image you're looking at, it's actually making a sound as well. I know you don't hear it, but it does. And the Akashic Records is the combination of the sound and light that's made throughout your entire life.
Wow.
It's a record.
You can't lie.
Whoa.
You can't lie.
No.
Because it's beyond your words. It's not analysing your
It's
words.
not your control.
It's not analysing
signature.
your words.
It's your frequency that's being recorded.
When I'm saying that you're being asked these questions in the Book of Coming Forth by Light, you're not really being asked questions. Your consciousness is being read for its... Your Akashic
Vibration.
records are being read. And it can't be lied because it's sound and light. If there's a distortion in it, it'll be known.
You know Charlotte
Yeah.
as a musician.
But
if
there's
you play
no-
a note wrong, you're going to hear it right.
I say
Yeah.
Osiris is sitting on the throne and in the Hall of Judgment, and because this is the way it's shown in Egypt, in the ancient Egypt, and he's judging the newly deceased, but it's not the deceased. Osiris is the newly deceased. It's
Yeah,
remember I
you
said there's
are
only
the
one male
Osiris.
energy.
Yeah.
There's only one female energy, so all of those energies will be the one male energy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
yeah. So it's all like different
Yeah.
distributions. It's all the same thing. Yeah.
So it's the one male energy. So they're the recently deceased and Osiris. So the one who's just died and Osiris who's the judge, judging the one who's just died, and the 42 judges, they're all the same person.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all the same energy. So it's you judging yourself, if you know what I mean. And completed what they came here to do. Because we all have a mission, it's just we don't remember it. And so, you know, I was talking about the story of Jesus Christ and how it related to the Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
You know, I mentioned that star Rostau, which is
Yeah.
Star Ross backwards. basically is in the Greek steros is the crucifixion, the cross that Jesus was crucified on, and rostao is the area where the weighing of the heart took place. So in the ancient mystery schools, the story I've just told you about the weighing of the heart and everything else is to do with what was turned into the crucifixion of Jesus.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, Golgotha is known as the place of the skull.
Yeah.
Well, the Great Pyramid is the place of the skull because it's a mirror, not a mirror image, but it's a replica or a model, if you like, of the human brain. Now, don't get me wrong; it's also a model of the Earth and the universe.
Yeah.
But it's also a model. Right? It's as above, so below. So it's a model of your human brain because your human brain is a model of the universe.
Yeah.
The universe within. We are a universe. That's how each of us are. The
universe is the
creators of our own universe,
yeah.
if you like. So, what I wanted to say was the crucifixion of Jesus is in actual fact, as told in the Bible, is a distorted version of whatever every mystery school initiate did and was able to do. So every mystery school initiate was able to ascend. And that's the lessons they were learning. Was we're here to learn the lessons of energy and how to manipulate energy. That's what we're here to do. We're here to keep the balance of order in the universe.
Yeah, because there has to be.
But part, I'm not saying it's all of our mission, of course, but certainly a big part of everyone's mission is to learn how to manipulate energy. In other words, to operate in the higher dimensions. Because it's only in the third dimension where you have solid, what we think of as matter.
Yeah.
When you move out of this, you don't actually have a body. So you have to operate in terms of, it's your thoughts that control things then. It's not your what you consider your physical form. So we're here to learn, this mystery school is to learn lessons on how to manipulate. No, I don't mean manipulate in a bad way. I mean, like lifting up a cup. You don't think that as a bad thing, but you're manipulating energy by lifting the cup.
Yes,
That's what I mean. So manipulating is not meant to be a bad word.
Yeah.
So Giza itself and the Great Pyramid itself is, I mentioned before in the podcasts, different podcasts, that Giza is placed at the very direct centre of the earth. And you remember I said your pineal gland is right at the very direct centre of your brain. So the Great Pyramid, on one level, it represents many things. There's never one thing. But on one level, in its placement in the direct centre of the earth, or the direct centre of the earth's landmass, it mirrors the placement of your pineal gland in your brain. Now, the Great Pyramid was called the Light in ancient times. It was called Takut. It was known by many names. It was also known as Perneter, and Perneter means the house of nature, or the house of the neter. So it was also known as Takut, which means the light. Now, if you remember before, I've told you to visualise the cover of the Pink Floyd album, Dark Side of the Moon, where the pyramid, they're holding the pyramid, and there's the prism, and the white light is going through it, and the 7 rays are coming out the other side. So, without getting into too much, if you can imagine, the Great Pyramid was called the Light, and it breaks down the one consciousness into the 7 rays. Okay, so every consciousness passes through. Look at the think of the Pink Floyd album. Every consciousness passes through the Great Pyramid as white light. But comes out the other side, divided in 7 rays. They're called the 7 seals of the Nile, or your 7 chakras. Your 7 main chakras.
Different colours.
Now you have approximately 86,000 chakras all over your body, but the 7 main ones that we're talking about would be the 7 main rays of light. So if you consider a soul incarnating on the earth, they incarnate through the first shape they will incarnate through on the how they have to manipulate their energy to become solid matter. So it's a tetrahedral shape that you'll pass through, and that tetrahedral shape will break down that single one energy, which previously was, for example, white light. It'll break it down into the 7 rays. That's the function of the Great Pyramid. But what happens when you want to go back up them 7 rays and become the white light again? Well, then you go back the same way. You see? So you go through the 7 rays, which become the 7 seals of the Nile, through the pyramid, and you become the white light again. The one, not broken down into 7. The light becomes broken down into 7 rays only in the 3rd dimension. You see? So that's only... So the image of the light going through the prism and being broken down into 7 rays, you might as well say is the image of a soul incarnating in the 3rd dimension. So what I told you about the Ogdod, the 8, and how it describes the process of cell mitosis. So we're talking about an ancient people describing creation from the point of light, photons, becoming, let's say, less dense energy into 7 rays of different colours, which then becomes less dense and then becomes atoms and cells, which then start to divide, and we have cell mitosis. So from the very energetic point of view of a soul incarnating into the third dimension, down to how it becomes physical matter and how cells begin to divide. So an ovum and a sperm come together and they create, it activates cell division, cell mitosis. And it takes 7 phases to create a new cell in cell mitosis. And on the 8th, you have the new cell.
That's it, yeah.
So if you look at the Ogdode, they're describing the process of cell mitosis. But this is in thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt. So I'm just pointing out the highly advanced information.
Yes.
And the cell mitosis and the master of the city of 8 and the Great Pyramid being an octahedron and all those things tie in. So what we're talking about is the descent of consciousness, symbolised by the light going through the pyramid and we're broken down into the 7 rays.
Yeah, and even you're saying like the pyramid is like a mirror of the human brain, right? It's you're going through your physical form.
Exactly. So yeah, what I was saying basically is that the Great Pyramid is a model, a scale model, if you like, of your pineal gland. In how it's placed, directly in the centre of the earth, and how your pineal gland is placed directly in the centre of your brain. So it's reflecting the law of correspondence above and below, as we spoke about before. So just to tie all that together, as I mentioned, as I was saying about the light on the cover of the Pink Floyd album, going through the pyramid shape. So if you can imagine, change that to the light going through your pineal gland.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're talking about the incarnation of consciousness in the third dimension, and as we mentioned before, the pineal gland being the third eye, if you like. So, I think we'll just wrap it up there for today. Anyway, I know there's loads more that you can talk about. And in terms of the Great Pyramid, you could talk forever, but we'll just wrap it up for today. But one thing I would like to mention anyway, if anybody is interested, is that I'm doing a journey to Egypt in March.
Yes.
So that's the 10th to the 20th of March. And that is, of course, a Mystery School Initiate journey, which will end on the day of the equinox in the Great Pyramid. And we will have our initiations there. Along that journey, we will do our Flower of Life workshop. So you'll learn how to draw the Flower of Life from the Seed of Life all the way up to Metatron's cube. And of course, you'll understand the information that goes along with it. And we move through the 7 seals of the Nile on that journey as well. So there's one of those journeys, the equinox journey in March. And I also have a journey to Egypt in September for the September equinox, and one in December for the solstice, and they're all on the website if you look at floweroflight.com. I also have workshops on in Ireland. There's one actually starting tomorrow. It's 31st of January. By the time you listen to this, it'll be over. But anyway, that's a Flower of Life workshop. There's another one at Samhain and one at
Summer solstice.
Lunasa and Samhain, yeah. So in August and October, and they're in Ireland. And I also have a journey, a summer solstice journey in Ireland, and that's all in 2020. So everything is on the website, floweroflight.com. If anybody wants to email me, just send me an email to info@floweroflight.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if you have any queries about the journeys or anything like that. But until the next time, I'd like to say, and happy Symbolic, yeah, of course.
February 1st.
So just until the next time, I'd like to say thank you for listening and goodbye. And I think maybe Charlotte and Christine want to say goodbye.
We want to say goodbye too.
Goodbye.
Happy Symbolic. Yeah. And we'll be back soon.
Yeah, we'll
Thanks
be back soon.
And email any questions to Antoinette.
And email any questions. Okay, thanks a million, and goodbye from the Flower of Light Mystery School. Goodbye.
Bye.